The river is louder than you expect. Cold, fast, and swollen from recent rains, it cuts across the landscape like a barrier that was never meant to be crossed under fire. You stand on the western bank, looking up at the opposite side, and that's when it hits you. They're already waiting. Across the water, tens of thousands of Persian troops line the high ground. Cavalry dominates the ridge, perfectly positioned to strike anything that dares climb out of the river. Behind them, disciplined infantry and hardened Greek mercenaries stand ready. They have the numbers, they have the terrain, and they have time. On this side, the situation feels very different. A young king, Alexander the Great, has just crossed into Asia with an army that can't afford to fail. His treasury is nearly empty. His campaign, by all accounts, has a lifespan measured in weeks, not months. Victory isn't just important, it's survival. No victory means no plunder. No plunder means no army. And no army means the end of everything before it even begins. His generals advise caution. Wait until morning. Regroup. Let the enemy make the first mistake. It's the logical move, the safe move. But standing here, watching the enemy grow stronger by the hour, another reality sets in. Waiting might be the greater risk. So the question becomes unavoidable. Do you delay and hope for a better moment, or do you gamble everything right now? He chooses to attack. And what happens next will decide far more than a single battle. To understand why this moment at the river matters, you have to step back and look at what's really driving the man behind the decision. When Alexander the Great crossed into Asia in 334 BC, he didn't come backed by overwhelming wealth or an endless supply chain. In fact, it was the opposite. His treasury was nearly empty. The campaign he was launching, an invasion of the vast Persian Empire, was operating on borrowed time and borrowed money. At home, taxes had already been reduced to secure political support. Loans had been taken from nobles to finance the army. What Alexander had wasn't financial stability, it was momentum. And momentum is fragile. It only works if you keep moving forward. The moment it stalls, everything begins to collapse. His army needed to be paid, fed, and rewarded. That meant one thing: victory had to come fast. Not eventually, not strategically over years. Immediately. There was no backup plan, no slow war of attrition. Without a decisive early win, the campaign wouldn't just struggle, it would end. While Alexander was advancing east, the Persian leadership was having a very different conversation. Regional governors and military commanders gathered to decide how to respond to this sudden invasion. Among them was a man who saw the situation with unusual clarity: Memnon of Rhodes, a Greek mercenary general serving Persia. Unlike many in the room, Memnon understood not just warfare, but economics. He understood how thin Alexander's position really was. His advice was simple and brutally effective: don't fight. Instead, he proposed a scorched earth strategy. Burn the crops. Destroy supplies. Deny the Macedonian army anything it could use to sustain itself. Then fall back inland, avoid direct confrontation, and let time do the work. Meanwhile, the powerful Persian navy could cut off Alexander's lines back to Greece, isolating him completely. No food, no reinforcements, no escape. It was a strategy designed not to win a battle, but to end the war before it truly began. And it would have worked. Alexander's entire campaign depended on speed and access to resources. Take that away, and his army becomes stranded in hostile territory with no way to survive. Memnon wasn't just offering a plan, he was outlining a guaranteed collapse of the invasion. But strategy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists inside human decisions, pride, and politics. The Persian commanders rejected him. Whether it was distrust of a Greek advisor, fear of destroying their own lands, or simple overconfidence, they chose a different path. Instead of starving the invasion, they decided to confront it head-on. In doing so, they gave Alexander exactly what he needed: a decisive battle. And that decision, more than anything else, set the stage for everything that followed. By the time the two armies finally came into view of each other, the outcome seemed almost pre-written, at least on paper. The Persian commanders had chosen their ground carefully, and it showed. They positioned their forces along the eastern bank of the river, not just holding the line, but owning the high ground above it. From where they stood, they could see everything: the water below, the muddy banks, and the narrow approaches any attacker would be forced to use. It wasn't just a defensive position. It was a trap waiting to be sprung. The river itself did half the work for them. Fast-moving, uneven, and deeper than it looked, it broke formation the moment men and horses stepped into it. The banks were slick with mud, rising sharply toward the Persian lines. Any force trying to cross wouldn't just be exposed, it would be disorganized, exhausted, and vulnerable at the worst possible moment: the climb out. And that's exactly where the Persians were waiting. Their cavalry dominated the front. Thousands of mounted warriors lined the ridge, positioned to strike the instant an enemy began to emerge from the water. They didn't need to chase or maneuver. All they had to do was wait for the Macedonians to lose cohesion, then hit them as they struggled uphill. Behind the cavalry stood Persian infantry, forming a secondary line to absorb or reinforce wherever needed. And farther back, held in reserve, were seasoned Greek mercenaries, disciplined, heavily armored hoplites who could stabilize the line or deliver a decisive counterattack if the front began to falter. It was a layered defense, simple in concept but devastating in execution. Let the enemy come to you. Let the river weaken them. Then break them before they can even form a proper line. On the opposite bank, Alexander the Great arrived to find a battlefield that offered him none of those advantages. His army was still coming together. Units had been left behind to secure supply lines. Columns were stretched out. From the march, what stood before the river was not the full strength of his force, but a partial concentration, around 18,000 men facing an enemy nearly twice their size, already in position and ready. Fatigue was a factor too. The Macedonians had marched hard to get here, and the timing of their arrival left little room for recovery. It was late in the day, light fading, and the window for action narrowing. Every conventional instinct would suggest waiting, resting the troops, regrouping, and reassessing at dawn. But the longer Alexander stood there, the clearer the imbalance became. The Persians had numbers. They had terrain. They had preparation. On every measurable level, they held the advantage. And yet, that very confidence, the belief that the position was unbreakable, was quietly shaping their expectations. What looked like an unbeatable defense was also a commitment. They had chosen to stand and fight here, on this river, under these conditions. And that meant the battle, if it came, would happen on ground they believed they controlled completely. From a distance, it looked like strength. Up close, it was something more dangerous. It was certainty. As the sun began to dip and the shadows stretched across the river, the tension on the Macedonian side shifted from observation to decision. This was the moment where caution and ambition collided. Alexander the Great had seen the terrain, measured the odds, and understood exactly what he was up against. But so had his most experienced general, Parmenion, and his conclusion was clear. It was the kind of advice built on decades of battlefield experience. Crossing a defended river late in the day, against superior numbers, into elevated cavalry positions, it checked every box of what not to do. By morning, the army would be rested. Visibility would be better. There was even a chance the Persians, unwilling to remain exposed overnight, might reposition or withdraw entirely. From a risk management perspective, waiting wasn't just reasonable, it was the obvious choice. But Alexander wasn't measuring risk the same way. Every hour spent on that bank gave the Persians time to improve their position, call in reinforcements, and potentially choose a different battlefield deeper inland, one that might be even harder to break. Waiting didn't reduce uncertainty. It shifted control. And for Alexander, that was the real danger. He didn't just want a battle. He needed this battle, here, now, on terms that could still be influenced. So he rejected the advice. The order came down quickly and without hesitation. The army would attack immediately. But this wasn't a reckless charge without thought. There was a structure behind it, a sequence designed to provoke a reaction. Instead of committing his full strength into the river all at once, Alexander opened with a limited force, a forward element of cavalry sent directly into the current. Their job wasn't to win the battle. It was to test the response. As the first wave entered the water, the Persian line reacted exactly as expected. Missiles rained down from above. Javelins cut through the air. Horses struggled for footing as the current disrupted formation. From the Persian perspective, the situation looked ideal. The enemy was doing precisely what the terrain was designed to punish, losing cohesion in the river before even reaching the bank. Sensing weakness, Persian cavalry surged forward. This was the moment that changed everything. Instead of holding their elevated position and forcing the Macedonians to climb under pressure, they descended into the riverbed to engage directly. It felt like an opportunity, a chance to break the attack early, to push the invaders back into the water and end the fight before it could properly begin. And in that decision, they gave up their greatest advantage. Their line opened. Their formation stretched. The high ground, the very thing that made their position so strong, was no longer fully occupied. What looked like a successful defense was becoming something else entirely. It was overcommitment, and Alexander had been waiting for exactly that. The moment the Persian line shifted, the battle stopped being a defensive stand and became a fight for survival. Alexander the Great saw it instantly. Instead of driving straight into the strongest point, he adjusted, angling his cavalry upstream, away from the main concentration. It looked subtle at first, almost like hesitation. But it wasn't. It was positioning. Then, at the exact moment the Persian cavalry had fully committed into the river, he turned. The companion cavalry wheeled left and drove forward in a tight wedge formation, accelerating into the exposed flank. This wasn't a scattered clash, it was focused impact. Lances lowered, momentum building, they hit the Persian line where it was no longer anchored to the high ground. Horse slammed into horse. The sound alone would have been overwhelming. Metal striking metal, men shouting, water churning beneath hooves. There was no room for elegant maneuvering. The terrain erased that. What followed was close combat at point-blank range, more like a street fight than a cavalry battle. Riders pushed, stabbed, and grappled, trying to force the other side backward, toward the bank or into the river. Every step mattered. Every inch gained or lost shifted the balance. And in the center of it, unmistakable, was Alexander himself. He didn't command from a distance. He was in the collision, marked by his armor, surrounded by his royal guard, and that made him a target. Persian nobles recognized him immediately. If they could kill him here, the invasion would end in a single stroke. One rider charged head-on. Alexander's lance struck first. Another came in from the side, blade swinging. The hit landed, hard enough to cut through his helmet and into his scalp. For a few seconds, the entire campaign hung on a knife's edge. Blood ran down his face, but he didn't fall. The line didn't break. And that mattered more than anything else happening on the field. Behind the chaos of the cavalry fight, something slower, but far more decisive, was unfolding. The Macedonian phalanx was advancing. Step, disciplined, relentless, long pikes leveled forward, they pushed into the contested edge of the river. Even in uneven terrain, their reach created space. Persian cavalry, built for mobility, struggled against the wall of spear points. As more ranks came forward, pressure began to build. What started as a chaotic clash in the water turned into a gradual push onto the bank. The Macedonian line held together. The Persian line didn't. It began on the flank where Alexander had struck. Then it spread inward. Units lost alignment. Commands became harder to relay. Momentum shifted, and once it did, it accelerated. What had looked like control just minutes earlier now started to fracture. Then it broke. The Persian cavalry pulled back first, creating gaps. The infantry line, suddenly exposed, couldn't stabilize the collapse. Some units tried to hold. Others began to withdraw. And in battles like this, withdrawal rarely stays organized for long. Behind them stood the Greek mercenaries, disciplined, experienced, and until now, untouched by the chaos. They regrouped on higher ground, shields locked, spears forward, forming a final defensive line. Unlike the Persian forces, they didn't panic. They prepared to fight. But the situation had already turned against them. The Macedonian phalanx advanced head-on, pinning them in place. Cavalry moved around the sides, closing the exits. Pressure came from every direction. What followed wasn't a quick collapse. It was a grinding, brutal fight. The mercenaries held as long as they could, but surrounded, outmaneuvered, and cut off, their formation eventually gave way. By the time it was over, the battlefield looked completely different from where it had begun. What started as a failed river crossing had become a total reversal. The line had shifted, the advantage had flipped, and the army that began the fight in control was now in retreat. And it all turned on a single moment, when one side moved too far, and the other moved at exactly the right time. When the fighting finally stopped, the riverbank told a different story than the one it had promised just hours earlier. The Persians had lost the field, but they hadn't been wiped out. Large portions of their force managed to withdraw, regroup, and live to fight another day. On paper, this wasn't the destruction of an empire. It wasn't even the largest battle of the campaign. And yet, something far more important had happened. For the first time, a Persian army had been defeated in open battle by Alexander the Great. That single fact changed everything. Cities across Asia Minor began to fall, not always through siege, but through surrender. Sardis opened its gates. Ephesus followed. One by one, key strongholds abandoned resistance. The psychological barrier had been broken. Persia was no longer invincible. And once that belief collapses, momentum shifts fast. Just as critical was what this battle revealed about Alexander himself. He didn't lead from behind the lines or from a position of safety. He led from the front, taking the same risks as his men, facing the same danger, and, at times, coming within seconds of death. That kind of leadership isn't just symbolic. It transforms how an army fights, how it believes, and how far it's willing to go. And then there's the bigger picture. What started as a high-risk gamble, an underfunded invasion with no margin for delay, suddenly became something sustainable. With new territories came resources, revenue, and time. The campaign didn't just survive Granicus. It evolved. 3 truths emerged from this moment. Persia could be beaten. Alexander was a leader who would risk everything alongside his army. And this invasion, once fragile, was now viable. But this was only the beginning. Far to the east, a greater response was already forming. The next battle wouldn't be against regional commanders. It would be against the king of Persia himself. If you want to see how this story escalates, and where the real clash of empires begins, make sure to subscribe and follow the channel. The Battle of Issus is next, and it changes everything.